Hello. I think it's on. Okay, let's start with some meditation. So meditate for about 10 minutes to settle down and get into a good state of mind for what we're doing here tonight. So try to sit in a position that is conducive for meditation, which means, hello. If you can, keep your back straight. Let your shoulders relax. You can have your hands resting in your lap or on your knees, whichever you're more comfortable with. You can have your eyes closed if you prefer, or leave them open a little bit to have some light coming in. That can help you stay more awake and alert during the meditation, just in case you're feeling sleepy. So let your body relax into this position. One helpful way to be more relaxed is to take a few deep breaths, breathing in slowly, deeply, and then exhaling slowly. And imagine if there's any tension in the body, it goes out with the breath, with the exhalation of the breath. So do that 3 times and then just go back to normal breathing. So just continue to breathe in a natural way without trying to control your breath. In other words, just let your body breathe on its own. And with your mind, your awareness, be aware of the breath coming in and going out. And try to let go of any other thoughts. Thoughts of today, things that you did today, things that happened to you, and so on. Or any other time in the past. So let go of all thoughts of the past. And the same with thoughts about the future, like what you're going to do tonight, tomorrow, and next week, and so forth. But just let go of the past and the future and just stay right here, right now, this present moment, present place. Just being aware of the breath coming in and going out. And anytime you notice your mind has gone away from the breath to some other object or thought or sound or whatever, just gently let go of that other object and bring the mind back to the breath. Now, just take a few more moments to see if you can generate a positive motivation for being here tonight. So, what we are looking at in this class are the teachings of the Buddha about how we can transform ourselves, particularly our mind, make it more positive, less negative, more happy and peaceful, less unhappy and negative. And this is to benefit ourselves, but also to benefit others. And then there's the long-term goal of the Buddhist path, which is becoming enlightened, attaining enlightenment, just as the Buddha did. And the reason for that is to help others as much as possible. So that was actually what the Buddha himself had in mind when he was teaching. He wanted to help all living beings, not just a limited number of beings. And he wanted to help all of us develop our highest potential, which is the state of enlightenment. So it's good, if possible, when we're listening to and learning about Buddha's teachings, if we could try to have at least a similar state of mind, that we wish to help not only ourselves, but also to help others, to help the world, to help all living beings. If you're comfortable with that idea, then see if you can think that that's your reason for being here tonight, is to be of benefit to yourself, to others, to the world. So now you can relax and open your eyes. Excuse me. So I actually have a slideshow tonight. So I don't know if we can set up the screen and okay, so tonight is the third class in a series of classes. So we're following a course which is called Discovering Buddhism. This is a standard program in our centers, and it has a number of different modules, different courses within it. And the first of these is called Mind and Its Potential. So what we're looking at here is what is the mind? That's a really important topic in Buddhism, because we talk about our mind and the potential of the mind and the possibility of our mind becoming enlightened and so forth. So it's good to know what is the mind and how it works and so forth. So that's what we're looking at in this subject. So far I talked about the nature of the mind, what the mind is. Do any of you remember? I don't know if you were here, but what are some of the things we learned about with regard to the mind? Like, is the mind a physical thing? Is it material? Is it something we can find in our body? Some part of our body, like an organ in our body? I see Yetta shaking her head. Well, yes, that's true. What Buddhism says, mind is not a physical thing. It's a non-physical thing. It's like non-physical energy, which has the ability to know, to experience things. And is the mind a fixed, unchanging, permanent thing? No. No, it's not. It's impermanent, constantly changing. More like a stream, a flow, a river, always changing. And also, mind isn't just one single thing, but it's a multitude of things. Because each moment we have different experiences arising and passing. In the next moment, other experiences arising and passing. So it's constantly changing, different experiences coming and going. And there are different types of mind. We can divide the mind up into different groups, different categories. And this is what we started looking at last week. We looked at one way of dividing up the mind into two types of mind called perception and conception. Does anyone remember what's the difference between these two? What's the difference between perception and conception?
I wasn't here for that. I would say that conception is something which is a collective or a collective understanding, but perception is more a way of interpreting,
A way
of understanding the interpretation you do of a concept, for instance.
Well, it's a good guess, but no. Not quite how it's explained. I mean, now in the West, or in English or in Danish or whatever, you might have certain ways of understanding these words, okay? But in Buddhism, there's perhaps different ways of understanding these terms. So, anyone remember what is a perception?
That was not about your experience by your senses.
Sorry?
The experience of your senses.
Senses? Yeah,
like
yeah.
How you sense the world. That
Yeah, it's like
somehow.
direct experience of the world, like seeing and hearing and smelling and tasting and feeling sensations in our body. So in a perception, it said that we have a direct experience, a kind of naked, bare, raw, direct experience of things that we see and hear and so forth. And then conception, on the other hand, is different. Remember what's the difference? How a conception experiences things?
Yeah, it's kind of, I can give an example, but it's kind of, when you visualize or remember a family member in your head. I mean, it's not a direct perception, but it's almost like a visualization or an imprint of that's a conception.
Yeah, in a conception, it doesn't involve our senses, seeing and so forth. So it's just, like you say, in our head or in our mind. And it's there's always an image of the object rather than the actual object. Like you say, you think of your mother or your sister or your brother or your child. So the person can be far away. They're not right in front of you. You can't see them, but you can think of them and have an image in your mind. There's an image of the person. So that's the main difference between perception and conception. Perception is dealing directly with objects, seeing them, experiencing them directly. They're right in front of us, right near us. Whereas conception is in our mind, and it's when we think about or remember an object, and it's there's an image of the object rather than the direct experience of the object. So perception is considered to be more kind of, more, how do you say? It's considered a better way of experiencing things because you and your mind is directly contacting the object. Whereas with conception, there's like this mental image, an image of the object rather than the actual object. So it's considered to be less ideal, less perfect in a way, you might say. Doesn't mean it's wrong or bad. Okay, so I'm just going to put up some examples of states of mind, and I want you to tell me if this is a perception or conception. First one, seeing a pattern of shapes and colors. Perception, okay. Thinking, that is a beautiful red rose. Conception, okay. Hearing some sounds. Perception. Thinking. That is classical music. Conception. Feeling some sensations inside one's head. Perception. I mean physical sensations. Yeah, like
Okay. Yeah.
pain or whatever. And then thinking. I have a terrible headache.
That's conception.
Conception. Okay. Remembering a conversation you had earlier today. That's a conception, yeah. Tasting something in your mouth. Perception. Thinking, that's chocolate. Conception. A dream about horses. Conception. Well, actually, there's different points of view.
Yeah.
Some books that I read, there's some who say dreams are conception, but some say they are mental perception, because there is a kind of perception which doesn't involve the five senses, but it's just mental perception. Another example is clairvoyance. People who have the ability to see other people's minds. They can look, they can see what you're thinking. So that's mental perception. So it's not involving the eyes or the ears or the nose. It's mind, mental. So some say dreams are mental perception. Some say they're conception. So I don't know. But anyway, they're not any of the five perceptions. They're only mental. Okay, so that's just to help us understand perceptions and conceptions. So in our experience all day long, our mind is switching back and forth between perceptions and conceptions. We see things and then we start thinking about them, making evaluations, judgments, liking, disliking, naming them, and so forth. We hear something and again our mind starts thinking about it. We smell something and our mind starts thinking about it. So all day long we're having perceptions, and following perceptions there are conceptions. Our mind is thinking about the objects that we see and thinking about lots of other things as well. I don't know about you guys, but my mind is very, very busy, very conceptual. So many thoughts, almost like an addiction. Can be all over the world, all over time, past, present, future. I think many people, but Western people in particular, have this problem. And so it's changing very, very rapidly. Probably much of the time we don't even notice. We don't even notice all the different experiences that are happening in our mind, because it's said that within the time it takes to snap our fingers, there's 65 thought moments, 65 experiences. Some traditions say even more, but anyway, there's a lot. So it's very difficult to be aware of every single experience that's happening with us. Do you think animals have conceptions?
I don't know. Well, I mean, only perception.
Sorry?
Only perception.
You think they have only perception?
Well, it depends, because they say that they dream.
Yeah.
At least dogs. Yeah, but dreams is mental perception.
Yeah, I think they do, because, for example, if a cat sees a mouse, it will have one kind of reaction, one way of reacting. If a cat sees a dog, it will have another kind of reaction. And I think, to me, that indicates there's some kind of conceptuality, even though they may not think that is a mouse and that is a dog, that is something I want to catch and that is something I want to run away from. They may not have that kind of verbalization like we do, but I think conception can still be quite basic. It just means being able to differentiate one thing from another and having, ways of reacting to it. So I think they do.
I think also many animals now we know that they can use different kind of tools. So that's also they must have some kind of conception to be able to.
Yeah.
Now I use this tool to get.
Yeah. And when a dog sees his owner,
Yeah.
getting very excited and wagging its tail and jumping up and down. When a dog sees the mailman or, somebody who looks suspicious, then the dog will have a different reaction. So to me, I think that indicates there's some conceptual activity. Conception doesn't involve language, doesn't necessarily involve language. Because babies haven't yet learned language. They haven't yet learned the names of things, but they will still have different ways of responding to different people and different objects. So I think that there's conceptual activity going on there. That's my understanding.
How about dolphins? Do you think they are dolphins? Do you think they are more reflecting, more over to conception than other animals?
I don't know. I don't know much about dolphins, but I remember this story that I heard. It wasn't dolphins, but whales. There was a ship sailing in the North Sea where there's icebergs, and it was very, very foggy, so they couldn't see very well. So they were kind of, sailing along, and suddenly some whales appeared to the side of the ship, and they went up to the ship, and they put their noses to the ship, and they were pushing the ship in a different direction. And so the people on the ship were wondering what's going on. And then after a little while, they saw there was actually an iceberg in front of them. So they were actually heading for an iceberg. And these whales saved them from crashing into the iceberg. So I think that indicates some pretty complex conceptual activity, and also compassion. I mean, wanting to help, wanting to rescue.
Dogs like in hospices and things, when people that are dying, they can sense things, and I'm not sure if that's perception or conception. I've heard stories about that.
Yeah. Maybe it's a combination of both, that they're able to pick up certain perceptions that we can't, and then conceptual activity that's able to know this is what that means. And, yeah. Okay, so according to Buddhism, conceptions are not bad necessarily. They could be bad. Like, for example, if you decide you don't like somebody and then you start thinking that person should be destroyed, and then you start thinking about how to kill them and so on, or blowing up a train station or whatever. So that kind of conceptual activity is not good, of course, but there are a lot of conceptions that are good. Like when you see a person has fallen down on the ground and they look like they're in pain, so our conceptual mind will think, oh, that person needs help, and then we'll probably go and do what we can to help them. And so conception can be very helpful and also very useful. Like I was saying last week, if we didn't have conceptions, we wouldn't have this building. Conceptual activity is what produces buildings and houses and electricity and computers and books and so on and so forth. So our lives would be quite primitive if we didn't have conceptions. So they're not necessarily bad. And also in the path, the Buddha's path, conceptions are important, for example, to understand what the Buddha was talking about when he explained the Four Noble Truths and the path to liberation, the path to enlightenment. We use conception to listen to and think about and understand these teachings, and then put them into practice. So it's actually necessary, at least in the beginning, to use conception. Later on, we try to go beyond conception, and in fact, it's said that in the mind of a Buddha, there are no conceptions. The Buddha is totally without conception. All of Buddha's experiences are direct perception. But
What
we
a
don't.
relief, right?
Yes, all that blah blah will stop one day. But we have to use conception to get to that point. This is important because some people think that the way to get enlightened and this non-conceptual state is to just stop all their thoughts. Don't think. Stop all your thoughts, and then you'll become enlightened. So according to our tradition, the Geluk tradition, that's actually not correct. We have to use conception to get beyond conception. We just have to learn how to train our conception in a good way, in a wise way, and then we can eventually get beyond it. But you can't just, anyway, it's not even possible to just stop having conceptions. It doesn't work. Okay, so this is one way of classifying the mind, one way of dividing up the mind into perception and conception. And this is kind of looking at how our mind takes in information from the outside and processes it and makes it into something useful or not useful, depending on what we're doing. And but we human beings do more than just take in information and process it. We're not like robots or computers, because they can do that too. They can take in information and process it and solve problems and so forth. But as human beings, we have other kinds of experiences, like feelings and emotions. So we feel happy, we feel unhappy, we feel love, we feel anger, we feel fear. So we have all kinds of emotional experiences. So where do those fit into the mind? They are part of the mind as well. So to understand this, I want to introduce another way of classifying the mind into what are called main minds and mental factors. Now, don't be put off by the terms. They're not that complicated. So this is just another way of dividing up the mind. So within our mind, there are some aspects that are called main minds and others that are called mental factors. So a main mind is that which knows, this is the way it's described, it knows the mere entity of the object. So a main mind, the function of a main mind is just to know that there's an object there. It's kind of rough presence without going into details, just the sort of bare bones of the object. Just knows that the object is there. And there are 6 types of main minds related to our 6 senses. So there's the eye, it's called literally eye consciousness, so seeing, ear consciousness hearing, nose consciousness smelling, tongue consciousness tasting, body consciousness feeling sensations in the body, and then mental consciousness. Okay, that's just the mind itself. So the second of the 2 divisions is called a mental factor. So a mental factor is also a type of mind, and what it does is apprehends various features about the object. For example, if it's pleasant or unpleasant and so forth. And there are 51 types of mental factors categorized in different groups. There's actually more than 51. There's lots. But in the traditional teachings, they mainly talk about 51. There are 51 that are most important in terms of our spiritual practice. And so these 2 types of mind, a main mind and a mental factor, they work together. An analogy that's sometimes used to show how they work together is that a main mind is like a leader, like a president or a prime minister or king or queen. And then a person like that usually has assistants. Sometimes they're called ministers or in America they're called secretaries, aren't we? Secretary of State and Secretary of Transportation and Secretary of Defense and so forth. And so there's the leader, kind of the central figure, and then there's all these ministers or secretaries who have different jobs. Each minister, each secretary. What do you call them in Denmark? You have ministers? Ministers. They help the prime minister to do all the different jobs. Yeah. Okay. So the main mind is like the president or the prime minister, and then the mental factors are like the ministers. That each mental factor has a different job to do, a different portfolio, you might say, a different function. And another analogy that's sometimes used is the hand. Like our hand is the main part of the hand. I don't know what you call this, but palm. Yeah, anyway, this part of the hand, and then there's the fingers and the thumb. Okay, so they're different, but they're all together. They're stuck together, and they work together. If you had just the palm of the hand without any fingers, then it would be quite hard to do things, right? You couldn't play the piano, you couldn't write, you couldn't use a computer. It'd be very hard. But if you just had fingers without this part of the hand, they wouldn't be able to work either. So they need to be together and work together to get things done. So I'm gonna illustrate that a bit more, but let me just show one other thing. So remember what I said before, that the mind is like a river or like a stream, like a flow, always changing, made up of individual mental events or experiences. So each of these mental events arises because of causes and conditions. It comes into existence. It lasts for just a fraction of a moment, and then it ceases, goes out of existence. But when it ceases, it gives rise to the next mental event, forms into the next mental event. So in this drawing, there are these three circles, A, B, and C. So these represent moments of mind or individual experiences that occur in our mind. So A is like in the first moment, and then that only lasts a moment, and then it transforms into B, and that only lasts a moment, and then that transforms into C. Okay, and so on and so on and so forth. So this is an ongoing process, a constant process. I wanted to be able to make this move, like actually show A appearing and transforming into B, and I don't know how to do that, but anyway, you have to use your imagination. I'm sure there's programs that you could use, but my computer skills are pretty basic. But this drawing isn't so ideal because there's a gap in between A and B and C. But in our mind, there is no gap. One moment of mind follows immediately after the previous one. Okay, so there's no gap in between. It's just a constant flow, arising and passing and rising and passing. Okay, so now if we were to isolate one of these moments of mind, for example, moment A, and then go into it like a scientist going into a cell or a molecule or an atom and explore it more carefully, we would find that it's actually made up of different parts, just like a cell or an atom is made up of different parts. Whoops, sorry. Okay, so I'll have another rough drawing to show. Okay, so one moment of mind consists of a main mind. Remember the main minds, one of those 6 types of main mind related to seeing, to our visual, seeing, and so forth. So there's one main mind, and then there's a number of mental factors that accompany it. And they come together in one package. So it's not, don't take this drawing too literally. It's not like that's what it looks like. But you have to think one mental state consists of a main mind plus a number of mental factors. Now, the number of mental factors can vary. There's at least 5. There's always at least 5, but there could be more. And the reason it said there's at least 5, because there's 5 mental factors, 5 types of mental factors that are always there, always present. One of these is feeling. So I thought to look at that particular mental factor, feeling, because it's a very, very important one, and just talk about that, what that mental factor does. Okay, so feeling, this is the name of one of the types of mental factors, and it's called an ever-present one because it's always there. Every single moment, every single experience we have, there's a feeling. And there are 3 types of feelings that can arise. One is a pleasant feeling. So, for example, I think most people, when we see flowers, we have a pleasant feeling. I think most people like flowers. That's why we give flowers to each other. There's flower shops all over the place selling flowers. People like flowers, most people, I think. So when we see a flower, pretty fresh, brightly colored flower, we probably have a pleasant feeling. At other times, we may have an unpleasant feeling. Now, I didn't mean to say that the baby himself or herself is unpleasant, but the crying of the baby. I don't know about you, but when I hear a baby crying, it's not a pleasant. I don't feel pleasant. Okay, so I think that's probably pretty universal. The sound of a baby crying, probably.
On an airplane.
Especially on an airplane. You can't run away.
Nighttime.
What?
Nighttime.
Yeah.
Nighttime.
Long.
Oh, yeah. Oh dear. Okay, so, and then the third type of feeling is neutral. And I don't know, for me, seeing a pair of eyeglasses, I don't feel pleasant. I don't feel unpleasant. I feel neutral. Okay, so now the kind of feeling we have is very much subjective. Not everybody has the same feelings towards the same objects. Okay, so there might be people who don't like flowers. Maybe they have hay fever, and yeah, so flowers mean suffering for them. So, and if they see a flower, they may go, ugh, unpleasant feeling. And there might be people who like the sound of babies crying. Who knows? It's possible. And then with eyeglasses, I mean, that could also give rise to a pleasant feeling. Like if you lose your eyeglasses and you're looking all over for them because you can't read without them. And then if you finally see your eyeglasses, you probably have a pleasant feeling, right? Finally, oh, my glasses. Somebody else might have an unpleasant feeling when they see eyeglasses. So the kind of feeling that arises with our experiences depends on different factors. According to Buddhism, actually, the main factor, they say, is our karma. The main reason why we have a pleasant feeling or an unpleasant feeling or a neutral feeling is the karmic imprints in our mind. But there could be other causes as well. For example, experiences we have during our life, right? So childhood experiences or other kinds of experiences could affect the feelings that we have. If we have a traumatic experience with a certain type of object, then whenever we see that object again, that can bring up an unpleasant feeling. Okay, so with every single experience, when we see something, when we hear something, when we smell or taste or feel a sensation in our body, or when we have a thought or memory, with every single one of our experiences, there's always one of these 3 types of feelings. So feeling is an important element just in our ordinary life. For example, if we love somebody, we care about somebody, or we're going to visit somebody in the hospital, we might buy flowers because we know that flowers make us feel good, and we figure they'll probably make that person feel good as well. We want to give them some pleasant experiences, so we'll offer them flowers. So that that kind of activity comes related to a pleasant feeling. When we hear a baby crying, then we feel unpleasant, but we understand the baby probably feels unpleasant as well. It needs something, it wants something, it's unhappy about something. And so that will motivate us to do what we can to comfort the baby, try to relieve its suffering. And then with neutral things, I was thinking about when a person is having a panic attack or a flashback, if they're suffering from PTSD, I've heard that what a therapist will do sometimes is to ask them to just focus on ordinary things, like look around the room and, mention what they see, or a lamp, a table, a carpet, a cushion, just neutral objects. And that can help them to calm down, to come down from this heightened state of anxiety, fear that they're having. So that was just something that popped up in my mind, a way in which we use, or we can use neutral objects in a beneficial way. But in the Buddhist teachings, there's another reason why feeling is an important mental factor. And that is because the feelings that we have can lead to what are called the three poisons. You know what the three poisons are? Ignorance. Yeah, these are three states of mind that are poisonous. They harm us. They create suffering. So what often happens, especially for those of us who are not enlightened beings and haven't realized emptiness, when we have a pleasant feeling, then it can lead to desire, attachment, greed, that type of mind. I want that. We want to own it. We want to possess it. We want to keep it with us and have it there forever and ever, and so on and so forth. And unpleasant feelings can lead to the other poison: irritation, anger, hatred. I don't like that person. I don't like that object. I want to get rid of it. I want to harm it. I want to destroy it, and so forth. And then neutral feeling is more connected with ignorance, confusion. I don't know if it's right to say that it actually causes ignorance, but it just perpetuates ignorance, because ignorance basically means we don't see the true nature of things. We don't see them as they really are. So for most ordinary beings, when we have neutral feelings towards objects, it doesn't give rise to anything positive. It doesn't help us get enlightened, but it's just a continuation of our ignorance.
For example, if one is in a conflict and some people are angry at that person and one is trying to be neutral toward that person, would that also be a sign of ignorance? Would also be you try to not make it worse than it already is.
I mean, neutral feeling is certainly better than anger and hatred and irritation.
Yeah.
But no, I'm talking more about our situation as unenlightened beings, where we don't see the true nature of things. We see things as if they exist inherently, independently, truly from their own side. They have their own way of existing. So even if you have a neutral attitude, a neutral feeling towards a person who might actually be a criminal or, person doing harmful things. So having a neutral feeling is certainly better than hating them. However, the way in which you see that person, you probably still perceive that person or see that person as being an inherently existing person. That's what I mean by ignorance.
Yeah.
So unless you have some understanding of emptiness, and you can see that person as empty of inherent existence, lacking an inherent existing self, then I'm just saying, for ordinary people who don't understand emptiness, who don't understand the true nature of things, our neutral feelings are still caught up with seeing things incorrectly, seeing things as inherently existing when in fact they are not. They are empty of inherent existence. Okay, so let's just look at an example of how this works. So I don't know if this is going to help, but we'll try. Okay, so let's say there's one moment of mind. So again, it's composed of a main mind in the middle, and in this case, it's an eye consciousness seeing an attractive object. So in other words, we just have this experience of seeing an attractive object. The attractive object could be a person, attractive man or a woman, or it could be a piece of clothing or a pair of shoes or an iPhone or a piece of cake, delicious piece of cake, whatever. So we see this attractive object. Okay. So that's the main mind. And then there's a number of mental factors that are accompanying it, one of which is a pleasant feeling. We have a pleasant feeling when we see this attractive object. Okay. And then, if we're not careful, in the next moment or after several moments, we could have this other moment of mind, which is a thought, thinking, I want it. So there's one of the mental factors in this state of mind is desire or attachment, grasping, craving, that state of mind. Okay. So there's three poisons that I mentioned before: desire, hatred, and ignorance. These are also mental factors. Those are mental factors too. And they are in a category of mental factors which are called root delusions. They're like the main delusions in our mind. And a delusion is a mental factor that causes our mind to be disturbed, to be unpeaceful, to be agitated. Okay. Now, in between these two, okay, so these are two different states of mind. Does that make sense? One is a perception. The first one is a perception. It's seeing an object. And the second one is a conception, thinking, I want it. Okay. So in between these two, there could be several other states of mind. There could be other perceptions. Let's just say, for example, the attractive object is a person. And what often happens is when we see an attractive person, we kind of, we might feel instant love at first sight, attraction at first sight. But maybe what happens more often is you're kind of checking the person out. You're looking at different aspects of the person, their figure, their hair, their eyes, their skin. You want to, really make sure that this person is attractive, is desirable. So you're kind of checking out, different aspects of them and evaluating, and their voice and their way of acting and so forth. So you're kind of, checking out the person. So there could be quite a number of different experiences there, perceptions, looking, hearing, maybe smelling, and thinking and evaluating and so forth before getting to this second one of thinking, I want it. So it may not be an immediate thing, but it may involve some. And also what Buddhism says is that what often happens in between these two moments of mind is another mental factor that is called inappropriate attention. And that mental factor has the function of exaggerating, building up. And in the case of desire, attachment, that mental factor, what it does is it looks at the object and then it kind of exaggerates the attractiveness, the good qualities, the beauty of the object. It sort of makes it into something more than it actually is. I don't know if you've ever noticed that or not, but yeah, okay. And in the case of aversion or hatred or anger, then it tends to exaggerate the negative aspects of the object. So you're looking at an object and you're kind of making it even worse than it is. You know, like exaggerating the bad things, sometimes adding things, projecting things onto the object. You know, like inventing stories about this person. Oh, he probably, you know, treats his mother badly and he beats his wife and he's mean to his kids. And, you know, your mind can make up all kinds of stories about this person, which you don't know at all, but you want to make the person into something bad. So this is another mental factor that operates in the process of going from a perception, just seeing an object, to either having attachment to it or aversion or anger to it. Okay, let me just do one more, and then we'll stop for a break. I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave at this point. This is kind of depressing. Let's look at what we can do about this process if we don't want to follow our old habits. Okay. We can apply mindfulness. Mindfulness is a mental factor. Okay. Mindfulness is paying attention to what's going on, knowing what's going on. And another mental factor is called vigilance, or it's sometimes called discriminating alertness. This is said to be a bit like a guard that, like in a bank, if you have a bank or prison, a museum, you have a guard whose job is to stand there and look at who's coming into the bank and checking to see if anybody might look like they're going to make trouble, like a thief or something, and then apprehending them if they do. So vigilance is also like that. It's looking at our mind and looking out for trouble, looking out for possible troublemakers like the three poisons. So if we have this state of mind, realizing that desire has arisen, it's like, uh-oh, there's a desire in my mind. And so that state of mind would have mindfulness and vigilance. So it means it's not out of control. It's not like totally gone out of control, but it's paying attention to what's going on. And then if you can recognize that desire is not a helpful state of mind and you don't want to perpetuate it, you don't want to follow it, then you might work on some antidotes and then at some point reach this one, which is a mind without desire. Okay, so you can get to a state where you do not have that desire that was there before. And in the retinue, or in the, you know, one of the mental factors accompanying this mind is one called non-attachment. Non-attachment is another mental factor, and it's one of the virtuous ones. This is a virtuous mental factor. It means not being attached when there could be attachment, not having desire when there could be desire. So it's like a freedom, a lightness, a freedom from desire. So now how much time it takes between the first one and the second one? It could take a long time. It could take a long time, but it could happen pretty quickly. If you're very familiar with, say, the methods for counteracting desire, then, you know, it might not take too long. For example, sometimes, I'm not saying I'm free of desire, but sometimes I'll notice desire coming up in my mind, and then I catch it and I think, now, would that object really make me happy? Now, I just ask myself that. Is that really going to bring me happiness? Is that really going to fulfill my needs and wishes? And sometimes just that itself, I'm able to say, no, that's not really going to make me happy. And it might make me suffer instead of happy. So then, you know, the desire is gone. So it's possible that in a short time one could be able to let go of the desire. But if it's a really strong desire and maybe it's been going on for a long time, then it might take more time. You might need to work on it more. Okay, so let's stop there because you're probably in need of a break, and then after the break we can see if there's any questions about this, and we can also do some meditation on it. So the usual traditional explanation of attachment is that it's something poisonous, something harmful, something bad, something we have to get rid of. But there's this relatively recent book by His Holiness the Dalai Lama called Beyond Religion. And there's a whole chapter on destructive emotions. And in this book, he says, with regard to like attachment and anger and so forth, that they're not necessarily destructive. They're not destructive in themselves. They only become destructive when their intensity is out of proportion to the situation or when they arise in situations that do not call for them. So he talks about attachment. He says, attachment is the feeling that holds families and communities together. So we don't usually think of it as destructive. However, when it becomes excessive and wants to control the object, it does become destructive. So this does happen sometimes in relationships, for example, that one person wants to control the other and doesn't give them freedom, uses them, manipulates them, and so forth. So in that kind of situation, it becomes destructive and harmful. But he seems to be saying otherwise. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It keeps families together, it keeps communities together, keeps people together. And then he says he seems to make a difference here between attachment and desire. He says desire in itself is not destructive. After all, without desire, the human race would cease to exist altogether. Preservation of the species. So I think he's talking specifically about sexual desire. In fact, desire is the emotion that drives many of our day-to-day activities, from getting up in the morning to eating, working, and pursuing our immediate and long-term goals in life. So this is quite interesting. When I read this book, I was very surprised in a way that the Dalai Lama is talking this way, that that the even attachment, desire, and even anger he talks about in there are not necessarily destructive. It's only when they get out of proportion, when they are inappropriate, in the situation. So he seems to say there's appropriate attachment, appropriate anger, appropriate desire, and inappropriate one. But I think we can all agree that there are times when attachment does become problematic. It leads to suffering, like falling in love with somebody. Okay, does that always lead to happiness? Does that always lead to good experiences? Not necessarily. Not always. I mean, maybe for a while it can lead to happiness, but then it might change into something else. So I think we all have experiences of how attachment, desire can lead to suffering. So then the question is, well, can we still enjoy things? Can we still enjoy friendships and relationships and being out in nature and so on, but not with attachment or with less attachment? Any ideas on how we can do that?
I think perhaps those, what are they called in English? Core families? Kernfamilie, what do you call them in English? Father, mother,
Immediate
child.
family.
Pardon?
Immediate family.
Immediate family. Okay. Now what you asked, I just wanted to say another pattern of relating, another kind of basis relations than being afhængig, ikke addicted, men afhængig. Dependent on just few persons. I think communities would do something for a new kind of attachment. I don't know.
Communion, did you say?
Communion, fællesskab.
Community.
Community, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Opening up more, having a broader view than just, you know, my family.
Mm.
Actually, that's something I thought when I first got into Buddhism, that I wanted to be able to open myself up more and have love, not just for my family, but more and more and more people. Because that's one thing about attachment. Sometimes attachment is related to our ego. You know, there's me, and then there's my little circle of my family, my friends, my house, my belongings, my world, you know, and then we try to hang on very much to that. It's all related to me and mine, and it's there's a certain self-centeredness there, you know, like this makes me feel good. I am dependent on this in order to be happy, and I want to keep this together for my happiness. So often our attachment is related to that. I and me and mine, my happiness. And so it can become kind of narrow in focus. So, I mean, Buddhism advises us, not all religions as well, to try to open up more and feel love, compassion, kindness for more and more and more people rather than just my little circle of people and things. So that's actually one way to have less attachment, is to try to open up our hearts more to more people, more beings. Think of others. Think of others more.
But I somehow thought of what you read up, that it was attachment that was the glue within families or communities, whereas I maybe see it more as commitment is the glue and not, because somehow the attachment is always a little bit, to me at least, it's a little bit greedy, the
Yeah.
attachment. The commitment can come from a very deep place within, where you actually commit to be with family, with the friends, with community, with the work, with something, but it doesn't have this cling of greediness. It actually is kind of uh, positive. So that was just my reflection
Yeah.
of
If we
what you
can
were
kind of
reading right
reduce
now.
the sense of self, I, ego, you know, and how everything relates to me, if we can lessen that and focus more on others and what's good for others and helping others, then that helps to lessen the attachment
I would reframe it as commitment and as a
rather
positive
than
way
attachment.
rather than attachment.
Yeah, yeah. I think maybe the Dalai Lama talks like this because he often meets with scientists and psychologists and philosophers and so forth. And in the West, I think the word attachment doesn't necessarily have a bad connotation. In fact, in psychology, right, and it's considered a
But you know,
healthy thing, isn't it, to have attachment?
yeah,
Like if you don't have attachment, there's something
yeah,
unhealthy
this
about that.
this bonding. You also speak about
Yeah,
bonding.
yeah,
But also his holiness, he says that if you have more concern for the other and less attachment, like then it's a good relationship because you're focused on the well-being of the other. But if
mm,
the attachment is more and focusing on the other's well-being is lower, that what causes problem.
mm.
That also makes sense.
Putting yourself first.
Yeah,
What I want, what I need
yeah.
first. Yeah. So I think part of the problem may be the word attachment itself, that it has different meanings to different people and um, not necessarily a negative thing. So I think that's why His Holiness made that statement. I think also another thing for me that's helpful is just to remember impermanence. The fact that things are not permanent, they're not going to last forever, they're going to change. I'm not permanent. My friends and family are not permanent. Things are not permanent. So remembering that helps to lessen the attachment because you realize these things aren't going to last forever. So it doesn't make sense to be attached to them because attachment usually involves I want them to be there forever. I want to be there forever. I want my friends to be there forever. I don't want things to end. So contemplating impermanence, remembering that helps to be able to let go of things, let them change, let them go. Um, should we do a little bit of meditation? We have short time left and enough talking. So once again, try to sit comfortably but with a straight back. That helps the mind to be more clear and focused and awake. So now see if you can recall an experience that you yourself have had of what I described tonight, this process of seeing a pleasant object and then getting kind of fixated, focused on that object, and eventually getting to the point of feeling attachment for it, desire for it, feeling, I want that object. And see if you can notice if your mind might have been exaggerating the good qualities or attractive qualities of the object, as opposed to seeing the object in a realistic way. There may have also been some fantasies, fantasizing how happy you will be, how wonderful it would be if you could have that object. So, one way of working with this type of situation in our mind is to take a step back from it and look at it objectively and just ask ourselves, am I seeing things realistically or not? Am I thinking realistically or not? Am I seeing the object as it really is or exaggerating it? And if I do manage to get the object, will it really bring happiness to me and my family, my loved ones? Will it really be good for us? It can also be helpful to consider impermanence, that the object is not going to last forever. It's subject to change and will probably at some point not work anymore, go out of existence, not be there anymore. And also, we ourselves are impermanent. We're changing all the time. So, if we consider that, that may help us to see things more clearly. So, after thinking in this way, we might still come to the conclusion that we do want the object, that it would be helpful for us. But at least we've made such a decision on the basis of rational thinking rather than just an impulse, which might not be very realistic. So this is something you could use when you find yourself in that kind of situation of finding attraction to some object and wanting to get it without thinking very clearly. So you could take a step back and just look more carefully at what your mind is doing, what your mind is saying, and question if this object really will be helpful for you, something that will bring happiness to you, or might just bring more suffering. And let's conclude by making a dedication of the positive energy we've created here tonight by coming together, doing meditation, and then listening and thinking about and talking about these teachings of the Buddha with the wish that it will bring benefit to ourselves, to others, to the world. So we've definitely created some good energy here tonight, merit, which is the cause of happiness. Let's mentally share this merit with others, wishing that it will bring happiness and peace to all living beings everywhere and help to bring us all closer to enlightenment. So I wanted to stop the talk a little bit early tonight just to ask, because I've noticed this class has been going on for a few weeks now, but the attendance is varied. It's not the same people every week. It's almost like different people every week. So I'm just not sure if what I'm doing is, the way I'm doing it and so forth is really what people would like to do. Are you interested in continuing to do this, or would you like me to do something else, something different? I'm open to suggestions, to advice.
I think it's a great idea. This is a great idea. This is a very good thing to do.
Yeah, because this Discovering Buddhism program, it's actually quite long. If you do the whole thing, it can take about 2 years. There's different courses within it. So that this is the first one, mind and its potential. The second one is about meditation. And the third one is a kind of overview of the path to enlightenment. And then I think there's one about death and dying and one about karma. So it sort of has different topics as you go along. And each one takes at least, 4, 5, 6 different lessons, classes, and so on. So, I'm happy to continue doing it if people if people are interested in coming. But I just wanted to check to see if that is, yeah, very important. Okay.
I can say personally, I did it already once before, so I'm just a little bit in need of a Sangye feeling, and I'm not able to join on Thursdays for
Okay.
meditation. Yeah, so that's my approach. Yeah.
Yeah.
More,
I could do more meditation. I sometimes get carried away with the presentations and the information, and we don't have that much time for meditation. But if you're interested in more meditation, I could try to make sure I have more time for that, if that's a wish or a need.
It has been nice today. So the opening meditation is I don't know how long we said.
It was only 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I
Maybe
could.
It could be longer, but I don't know. But it was nice, I think.
Yeah.
I have a question. Are you at one point showing the DVD, that part of it?
I was wondering about that.
Yeah.
Does it exist?
Yeah, otherwise I have it at home. So
Yeah.
I think we have it
I
here
was
also.
thinking that
Because
we
that's
could.
also an interesting way of
Yeah.
seeing some other teachers.
I thought maybe after we finish, we
Yeah.
could watch the DVD related to this. But that's not too long. I think it's only about 20, 25 minutes for each one. But yeah, that would be fun to watch.
Yeah.
Get a different perspectives. see Richard Gere. I think he's in some of
Friend.
them. I think Keanu Reeves is in one of them. Is it Keanu?
No, she's not there.
So she's not in the DVD.
No, she's not. She's on the
She's
other
just
one.
on YouTube.
The chanting. She's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
chanting. This Japanese.
Okay,
Oh,
she's.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, she's not there.
Well, anyway, we can keep going with this, and
I think it's
We
been
do
a nice
have-
format. I think it's been a nice balance between the information and the education part of it and the meditation, like you said. But it's always nice with some multimedia. That would be fun.
yeah, I mean the Tibetan teachers don't usually use it. They just talk, and then you have to
Yeah.
use your mental faculties to visualize and imagine and retain the information. So, okay, so we'll keep going. I just realized I think I'm going to try to rush out so that I can catch the train because now I have to walk. I don't have a bike. Okay, so thank you very much.